Hi, everybody, and welcome. We are so excited today to have the third day of the marathon, which is Back to Basics on our new show, Onwards and Upwards. My name is Tanya Friedman, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Kinetics USA. And I'm joined by my colleague, Carl Schusterman. Hi, Carl.
Hi, how are you, Tanya?
Good. Welcome. We are excited to have you here on the final day of the marathon. So I wanted to welcome all the nurses that are watching from all over the world. We have been blown away by how many nurses have been watching the show and are so excited about the information that we're providing. As everybody knows, there is a nursing shortage in the USA, that means that there are lots and lots of jobs for global nurses right now. So our show, Onwards and Upwards, we'll be coming to you on a regular basis. This is Kinetics USA live show for global nurses. And we will be bringing you everything that you need to know in order to come to the US and live and work here successfully. So today is the third day of the series. And I saw already we had a question. It was from Armand. And keep your questions coming. I see we have a lot of questions in the chat, and I'll try and get to as many of them as possible. Armand asked where he can find day 1 and day 2. You can find that in the chat or in the posts, in the Kinetics USA posts. And today we're going to be talking about in day 3, we're going to be looking at the roadmap of the 5 stages of the consular green card. And we're going to be talking about the last 2 pages of the last 2 stages, should I say, of the consular green card. So on day 1, we did the pre-filing. And on day 2, yesterday, we did the filing of the immigrant petition and the National Visa Center and everything that a nurse needs to know about those 3 stages. And today, last but not least, we will have Carl talking about the consular interview and welcome to America. This is what everybody wants, right? When we can do our happy dance. Welcome to America. Okay, and before we get started, please also stay on until the end of the show, because yesterday we issued a download, a free booklet for nurses, specifically designed for nurses, of everything you need to know about the EB3 consular green card process. So feel free to download that. Anybody who downloads it until 8:15 this morning, Pacific time, so that is in just in probably 45 minutes. So you've got 45 minutes still to enter the raffle. And please stay on until the end. We will be announcing the winner of the $200 gift card at the end of the show. Okay, so Carl, let's get started. Everybody, let's onwards and upwards, right? Carl, first of all, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I got into immigration law way back in the 1970s. 1976, I got a job with the Immigration Service. I did naturalization interviews. And then I actually became a prosecutor for a while for the Immigration Service, which I thought was actually a pretty good experience. And in 1982, I went into private practice. And we've had a concentration in our law firm about getting in healthcare. So we've helped many thousands of doctors and nurses come to the United States. And it's something I'm very passionate about. My wife, who just walked in the house, she's born in Mindanao, grew up in Cebu, went to UP in Luzon. We call her Luz V. Minda, but her name's actually Sonia. And, I've had a lot of, very interesting experiences testifying before Congress, having cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. And I found immigration to be something very fulfilling. I think immigrants bring a lot to our country, and that we should keep encouraging immigration to the United States.
And Carl, you certainly have done that. I don't know if everybody realizes who's watching that Carl is pretty famous in the US. He's being modest. He's not telling you about all of his accomplishments, but he's in the top 100 lawyers in the US. He's on the who's who list of lawyers in the US. So, Carla, I think you're being modest, and we're very glad and very grateful that you're giving your time today to share all of your knowledge and your insights that you've learned over the last, what is it, like 40 years?
Yeah, yes, in 1976, actually 45 years. It's hard to believe I've been doing this for. But I should caution you. I'm sort of the generalist. So, somebody says, "Oh, should I have this paper notarized or that?" I might not know the answer, but the attorneys I work with and the paralegals, they'll know those specific answers. Yes.
Okay. Well, you have an enormous amount of knowledge, Carl. So we are going to be tapping into that wisdom in the next 45 minutes or so. All right. So let's get started. So today, let's go back to the roadmap, to the 5 stages. So today we're going to be talking about the very exciting steps of the consular interview and welcome to America. When we talk about the consular interview, Carl, people often hear about the consular interview and get really nervous and get scared because it's kind of that face-to-face, and that's the end goal that we have. It's just kind of like at the finish line. Tell us a little bit about how to get prepared for the consular interview.
Well, I think it's, I know from my own experience just being an immigration officer, when we prepare people for consular or immigration interviews, one of the biggest things is to show respect for the officer who's interviewing you. So, don't come in a T-shirt or anything like that. Make sure that you dress appropriately. Make sure you bring your paperwork with you. They probably have copies of most of it, but just in case, it's good to have the documents with you. I have the 3 Schusterman rules, so let me just quickly go through them.
We all ears.
Yeah. I mean, number 1, this might seem obvious, but number 1, tell the truth. Okay, don't.
Absolutely.
Some people, they just get it in their heads that they have to exaggerate certain things or else they won't get the green card. But it's really important not to exaggerate, just to tell the truth as it is. If you have 2 years experience, don't try to make it like you have 12 years experience. It's not going to get you a green card, but it's going to make the officer look at you like, should I believe what this person's saying to me? Mm-hmm. Number 2, recognize, and I've been out to the embassy in Manila on Rojas Boulevard. I watch as they're doing these interviews. They have a very, very limited time to do each interview. So my second rule is don't volunteer. Don't start telling them your life story. Just listen to the question very carefully and answer in a sentence or 2. You may have more to tell them, but if they really want to know more, they'll ask you a follow-up question. So don't, be mindful of their time, okay?
And that's kind of interesting because I think sometimes what happens, it's an interview. So typically, even if it's a job interview, and here it's a consular interview, so it's kind of like a whole nother level, but people tend to get very nervous. And when you get nervous, you start rambling and talking about all different kinds of things. So I think that advice of keeping it 1 or 2 sentences, concise, truthful, to the point is really good advice.
And then the third thing, it is super important, and a lot of people don't think about it, and that is don't guess. If you're not 100% sure of the answer, just say, I'm sorry, I don't remember this. And sometimes I've had clients where the examiner gets mad. What do you mean you don't remember? Mm. But it's still what they're looking for, and they deny some cases. Haven't had a nurse denied, but I've had lots of people come to me on things like marriage cases or asylum cases, and they said one thing on the application, and then they say another thing to the officer because they're nervous and they really can't remember, did I meet my husband on a Tuesday or a Monday? It's like, I don't know what day I met my wife. I mean, that was over 30 years ago. So, but they're looking for contradictions. And if they see that you've contradicted yourself, you could get a denial saying, it's just unbelievable. You said one thing on the application, you said another thing at the interview, and that's the worst thing that you can do at the interview. So read over your application carefully, but remember, you're not on Jeopardy. You're not going to win a prize, by remembering what day you met your husband or wife or exactly when you started working for your present employer. And if you can't remember, it's just better to say, I'm sorry, I can't remember what that date was or what that color was or whatever. And you'll be in far better shape than if you make a guess and the guess is not accurate.
Well, that is really great advice. Very, very valuable. Because as I said, I think sometimes when people get nervous, they start to ramble and give all kinds of information that's maybe not relevant. But really important to review what you've put onto that application beforehand so that you familiarize yourself and you prepare.
Right.
Beforehand. Carl, before the nurses go to the consulate, they are going to have to do a medical. Can you give us what your best practice tips are for the medical, or any mistakes that you've seen nurses made over the years in terms of?
I haven't really seen any serious mistakes. I mean, I think people worry too much about the medical. They think, actually, I did think of one big mistake. So I know some of the doctors in Manila, I once had this happen. They will ask people, have you ever smoked marijuana? Have you ever taken any drugs? And people will be less worried than they'd be at the interview, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I smoked a few joints, when I was in college." Remember, the doctor's going to share that information with the examiner, okay? And the immigration laws are very, very harsh in the United States. I used to say, if marijuana smoking was enough to deny a green card, then Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama would never have been able to get green cards. Certainly Trump wouldn't have been able to get a green card in the United States. But that, the fact that somebody did smoke marijuana in the past, but they weren't arrested or convicted of a crime, is not something that would keep somebody from getting a green card. But this particular client called me from the Philippines, so it was 10 years ago, and they actually denied him because he had told the doctor that he had smoked marijuana, and we had to wrestle with the embassy in Manila for quite a few weeks, and then we finally got him the green card, and he came to the United States. But he was worried that, at that time, it took years to get your interview. I mean, it's faster now. And he thought it's all down the drain, So what they're looking for is, really serious communicable diseases. And they're not going to let somebody over with one of those diseases. And I should point out something new just happened this week.
Yes, I was just going to bring that up, but go ahead.
Starting October the 1st, I would say 99% of all people must be fully vaccinated for the coronavirus to get green cards. That starts on October 1st this year. There are a few exceptions for religious reasons and so on, but I think, if you're coming up for a green card interview anytime soon, or even if you're not, but go and get vaccinated. Also this week in the United States, the Pfizer vaccine, which my wife and I got, was finally given full approval by the Federal by the FDA. So, you know, you'll be protecting yourself and you'll be protecting other people.
Yeah. And we will be, I think we have already, but if not, we will be posting that update about the vaccines and October 1st deadline on our Kinetics feed so that you can read that and prepare yourself in that regard as well. And that is a trend that we're seeing in the US anyway, that most hospitals, not all, but a lot of hospitals now are moving towards giving deadlines on vaccines. So that seems to be a trend all over at the moment. Just two things that I wanted to raise actually from our side of some of the mistakes that we've seen people make on the medicals before we move back to the actual interview stage is going to their own doctor.
Oh my God.
Have you ever seen that happen before, Carl?
No, I haven't. That's interesting. Yeah, they give you a list and you must go to a doctor that's been approved by the U.S. government. Absolutely, Tanya.
Yeah, so that has come up for us. We've had one or two cases like that where somebody didn't realize, sometimes people don't, there's a lot of information and it can feel very overwhelming. So we have had one or two cases where people gone to their own doctors, to their own physicians, and didn't realize that they had to go to a...
I thought of another, I did think of one thing that I've seen a mistake a couple of times on, that the doctors will give you the exam in a sealed envelope.
That's the other one, yes.
Right. Don't open the envelope. Make sure it's sealed when you hand it to the examiner at the embassy, because they want to open it. If you open it, then you've screwed up the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So please, it actually says it, but don't open that envelope, as Carl said. And then the third mistake that we've seen, we only had one nurse who made this mistake, but I just want to raise it in case it comes up for anybody else. And that's the importance of this show, Onwards and Upwards, because the more prepared you are, the more you educate yourself, the less hassles and stress you're going to give yourself with this process. But we did have one nurse in the past who didn't realize that the whole family had to be vaccinated. And then went to the consulate, and she happened to have 5 kids and a spouse, and became very problematic. So just want to highlight that also for some people, because again, there's a lot of information. It can feel very overwhelming and very stressful. And you don't want to miss that detail, because that caused a lot of issues. And thankfully we were able to resolve that. Okay, so we're going to put up a graphic of some of the potential questions that you might get at the consulate. And I'm going to read through that. And Carl, feel free to kind of jump in and talk about any of these questions. I just want to mention that obviously we don't know exactly what the officer is going to be asking. These are just some potential questions that we've seen that the officers do typically ask. So it's a good idea to know what these are so you can be prepared. So asking who is your employer, because obviously this is an EB3 green card, employment-based. How did you learn about your employer? How did you apply? Where's your employer's address? What is your hourly rate? Where will you be working? Which area are you assigned? How many hours per week will you be working? When will you travel to the US? Who is your contact person in the US? Is your employer providing you relocation? And how long have you been working as a nurse? This should be consistent with the DS-260. Carl, any other questions that you've seen the consulate officers ask, or any comments on that list?
Yeah, I think the list is very good. It did trigger a memory that I had. A lot of my wife's nieces, we've actually immigrated over either from the Philippines or they've gone to Canada, and we've immigrated them from Canada. And but I remember one specific niece, because she lived with us for a while, and her husband actually works for me. I gave him a job. He's very good. But there was some big recruitment company, certainly not you, Tanya. You would never do anything like this, but I couldn't believe they had done this. When they have jobs, in hospitals across the U.S. that they make contracts with, and they told her that she would be working in a suburb of Los Angeles. when she actually got here, they said, oh, that job's disappeared. It's already been filled. And you have to go up to Idaho, which is over 1,000 miles away from Los Angeles. And she goes, what do you mean Idaho? I mean, my family's here and you told me I had a job here. And fortunately, I was not representing her. She had, through the company, she had another immigration attorney. And I thought, this is strictly against the law for them to, she's already told the embassy in Manila that she's going to be working in Los Angeles, and they're giving her a job 1,000 miles away. So I said, who's the lawyer? And it was, a guy that I knew for years. And I called him up and I said, hey, you and I both know that that's against the law for the company to do that. And I'm going to give you 24 hours. I want something in writing. That what they told her was that I think it was like $40,000 that they said they had spent on the whole case, and that in her contract she was going to have to reimburse them if she didn't go to Idaho. And I said, no, you can't do that. You told her you had a job in LA. She told the embassy that. Mm-hmm. I'll give you 24 hours or we're going to turn that information over to immigration, and your client is not going to be able to bring any more nurses to the U.S. And about 3 hours later, the guy called me and he wrote me an email and he said, okay, forget the $40,000. She's fine. She doesn't.
My goodness, Carl.
But I thought, I was taken aback. I didn't know that companies thought they could get away with it. And I guess if she hadn't had an uncle who was an immigration lawyer.
Thank goodness for you. Wow.
She might have moved to Idaho. And I just thought that's not the way to handle things. So, people sometimes think they can skirt the requirements of the immigration law. And I'm not talking about the nurse. I'm talking about the employer or the recruitment agency. And, I've worked with, Tanya and I, we've worked together for years, and I know you've never done anything like that. But once in a while, there's somebody out there that does that. And you should be very careful, like which recruitment agency you sign up with. Mm-hmm. Because if they're telling you things that don't sound right, guess what? It probably is not right.
Yeah. Wow. That is a shocking horror story. And unfortunately, it does sometimes happen. And that's as you say, you've got to check out the company, the employer, and make sure that everything is legitimate. And because at the end of the day, at the consular interview, I mean, people get nervous, Carl, but really what they're trying to do is just to make sure that this is a real job, that you're a real nurse, and that everything is above board, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's not as complicated as it seems. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a very a good story for people to be aware of. I'm going to take some questions about the consular interview. So I have a question here from Manny. Manny's asking, what happens if you don't have a specific document when you go to the consulate? What will happen?
Yeah, so, of course you should try because, these days it takes forever to get interviewed. So, but it's not like they deny your case if you don't have your third kid's birth certificate or something. But what they'll do is they'll give you a piece of paper and they'll say, you need to come back and you need to present that document. So it will just delay you getting the green card, but it won't result in a denial.
Okay. Okay. Can you explain, this question is from Anna. I am in the UAE and my family is in Manila. Can you explain follow to join?
Yeah. So let me back up because it's terminology. It's like what immigration lawyers speak. So when you're getting sponsored by an employer in the U.S., the employer is the petitioner. You are the beneficiary of the petition. Your family members, which means your spouse and any unmarried kids under the age of 21, are considered derivative beneficiaries, okay? If usually, my best advice is, you know, and I totally understand she's in the UAE and her family's in the Philippines, so it might be hard to do this. But, you know, if you can have your interview all together, like if she goes back to Manila for the interview, then everybody will be approved at the same time and can get on the same flight to the United States. On the other hand, if she gets interviewed in UAE and then, you know, she has to get interviewed first because she's the nurse. If she's interviewed, then her family members are in that follow to join category. They're able to get green cards because she has got a green card. She's the nurse, right? So they can have their follow to join interview in Manila. Unfortunately, it might be months later. So she will come to the United States and start working. Well, I'll tell you about the time period. And they then will get interviewed several months later, and then they will be able to come and join her. Although, what the rule is, because once you get interviewed, you're not required to come the next day to the United States. You have 180 days according to the Immigration Service. If you come on day 181, you've lost your green card. So, but if you come on day 179, you're still okay. Yeah, you're still okay. So,
and Carl, sorry to interrupt you, but when does that date start? Does it start from the date you get the stamp in your visa? I mean, in your passport?
Well, it's the day that the embassy approves your application for the green card. Although you're not actually a green card holder till you show up at the U.S. and I can describe that in just a moment. But yes, as far as her question with the following to join, so one thing she could do if she doesn't want to come to the U.S. and have her family still be in the Philippines is she could wait, a month, 2 months, 3 months, however long it takes Manila to set up the family members for an interview, and then they could all fly in at the same time, okay? But it will be a delay. Her employer might not be really happy about that if they have to wait a few extra months. So she may want to consider actually going to Manila and having the whole family interviewed at the same time.
Okay. But she probably, it's not a good idea to be changing consulates, right? I mean, what?
Well, it will take.
And that delay.
It will take time. Yes, it will take time. So at the beginning of the process, when the employer submits the I-140, if the person is not in the U.S., which most nurses are not, they have to designate which consulate that the approved I-140 will be sent. The National Visa Center will send that to the consulate. So that, my idea would be, okay, if you're in one country and your family's in Manila, maybe you want to go back to Manila and just have the interview all at the same time to make sure the family can all come together and there's no delays. But if you've already said it's going to be at the it's going to be in Abu Dhabi that you have your interview, then the family is still going to be interviewed in Manila. And so you may want to arrange with your employer that you will just wait a few months until your family gets in and all come at the same time. Or if you're okay coming to the United States a few months before your family, you can do that. And they will follow to join you from Manila.
Okay, so it's probably a good idea to have that discussion with your family beforehand so that you can be on the same page and don't change course in the middle, because that can delay things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Carl, I wanted to bring up, there's a question here from Tilda in the chat, which I think is a really interesting question. And because this vaccine mandate that came out is new, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question. Tilda is asking, are children exempted from taking the COVID-19 exam?
Yes.
Vaccine.
Yes.
Sorry.
The vaccine. Yes, yeah. They are. Yes, they are.
Okay. So Yeah, our team said children must be vaccinated, but as Carl said, they are exempt. I think, what is the age cutoff? I'm not actually sure.
I was afraid you were going to ask me. I don't. I don't.
Whatever the CDC age limit is, I think is probably the guideline, and we're going to just clarify that for everybody as well. But that is a new mandate. But I just wanted to ask that question. Okay. So we have another question here from Maria, who's asking about what is a 221G and what can be done in that circumstance.
So 22G is a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and it provides that if the State Department, when you have your interview at the embassy, if they're not convinced that you meet the criteria to get the green card, they can give you, I'll call it a tentative denial, okay? It doesn't mean you're not going to get the green card. It could mean like they don't think you've submitted enough evidence. It could mean that they think that there's something that you've done that you might not be eligible for the green card, but they're not giving you a final denial. They're going to give you some paperwork in the mail later, and they're going, usually you have up to a year, although who wants to wait a year, but you have up to a year to respond. And if you can provide the additional paperwork that they don't have, like let's say you need police clearances for every country you've been in for more than 180 days. So you've been in the Philippines, you have that police clearance, but you've also worked in Ireland for 9 months, and you didn't bring the police check with you. Well, you may get a 221G denial, but it's a tentative denial. They're not saying you can't get a green card. They're saying we need more evidence that you didn't commit any crimes when you were in Ireland. And when you give that to us, then we'll give you the green card. But there's many reasons that, people get the 221 denials. And in some cases, we've not with nurses, thank God, but I've had people, especially during the last administration in Muslim majority countries, that they're doing background checks to make sure that they're not a terrorist or something like that. And they call me it's been 9 months since their interview at the embassy. And, we make an inquiry. If we don't hear back, we go to federal court and we sue. And then they usually clear it up very quickly and give them the green card.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that information. There was a question from Lenny, and this actually has come up a couple of times I've seen as well. What do I do if I put something incorrectly on my DS-260?
You corrected it. Yeah, you corrected at the interview. I mean, I thought we got married on this date. It was actually a week later. I mean, you corrected.
Okay. All right. And then there was a question here also from James. Can I take my expired visa screen to the consulate, or does it have to be valid?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you could take it, but it's not going to be accepted because it's already expired. So, yeah, you have to get the updated visa screen.
Okay. So, Carl, how will somebody know if their case has been approved at the consulate?
Well, usually the consulate will tell you right then at the interview that the case is approved, but you do have to be patient because I can tell you from my time working in the immigration service, you go in, maybe your sister or your best friend is a nurse with an offer from the same employer in the U.S., and you have exactly an identical case, and they get approved and you don't, or you get approved and they don't. And you think, oh, it's my employer, it's my lawyer, it's a lot of times it's just the particular officer, okay? So some of the officers have a lot of experience, some are brand new, they are not lawyers, they're not, and this is all about immigration law. Some have to talk to their supervisor before they, stamp that, you were accepted. So, don't start losing sleep over this. It just happens all the time. And it depends which officer you get. But, after 45 years of doing nurse cases, I've never got a denial. And it's not because I'm a genius or something. It's just because, I would say the nurses, I've hardly had any nurses who've ever had a serious crime in their life. But when I do consultations, which I do from home now on Zoom, there's not a week that goes by without somebody with a fairly serious crime calling me up and can I get a green card and whatever. But it's never happened on a nurse case. The problems on nurse cases tend to be really quite small and easy to get over that. So I think most nurses should just take a deep breath and relax. And if they don't get approved right at the interview, they will get something in the mail from the embassy saying, we need you to provide this form, and this form. They submit it, and then they get approved.
Okay. So that's great reassurance. So let's go back to our graphic on the roadmap and just talk a little bit about, so we've had the consular interview. So we've now been to the consulate. We've heard that we've got an approval. And the next step is, well, first of all, you're going to do your happy dance because now you are ecstatic. This is your American dream. And this is what I know everybody who's watching is dreaming of and hoping for and praying for. So you've got to celebrate the moment. But Carl, take us through what happens next. What are the next steps before you arrive in the U.S.?
Okay. So obviously, when you get approved at the embassy, the next step is you're going to book a plane flight for you, and if you're married or you have kids, for members of your family. And then you're going to fly into a particular airport in the U.S., and you're going to go through, you'll see a big line. People, U.S. citizens go to gate number 1, green card holders go to gate number 2, temporary visas go to gate number 3, So you're going to get in the proper line. You're a potential green card holder, but remember, even though the embassy has granted your case, you're not actually a green card holder until you get admitted into the U.S., okay? So the agency is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. It's called Customs and Border Protection. And again, my wife used to be one of those agents at the airport, okay? And when you come through the line, most people, they're just, oh, you have a green card. How long have you been out of the U.S.? Where'd you go? Okay, stamp, and you're in 2 minutes, right? But if you're somebody who just got approved at the embassy, it's not quite that easy. So when you go through the line, they're going to say, oh, you just got approved at the embassy, and they're going to send you to a room. And nothing for you to worry about. It's just how the procedure works at the airport. It's called secondary inspection. And then they're going to open up an envelope that the embassy gave you, and they're going to ask for your passport, and they're going to ask you a few questions, and where you're coming to work, where you're going to live, you have a nurse license in this state, so on and so forth. And then, it could be 15 minutes, but it could be 2 or 3 hours, just depending on their backlog there. So, bring a book to read or whatever, because you may be sitting in a chair for a couple hours, and if your relative's picking you up at the airport, you better let them know in advance that you're not going to come out right when your luggage comes out. So they should just pick up your luggage and sit at the airport and wait for you to come out. But after they ask the questions, if everything goes right, they'll stamp your passport. That's the minute you'll become a green card holder.
That's the moment.
Exactly. And if it doesn't happen often, but if something is questionable and they can't make a decision there, they'll give you a temporary entry, and they'll refer you to something called deferred inspection. And I've been to quite a few of those deferred inspection interviews. And that means like in a week or two, whatever time they give you, you'll have to go to this local CBP office, and they'll ask you questions about, didn't the employer say you had a job in Los Angeles and you told them at the airport you're going to Idaho? I mean, what's that all about? So they will clear that up, and then if you pass the deferred inspection, they'll stamp you at the CBP office rather than at the airport.
Okay. Well, that's interesting information, and I think it's good to kind of set your expectations. That you might be at the airport for a few minutes, or it might be longer, or you might have a deferred action. I have to tell you, I've been doing this for many, many years. Kinetics have been bringing thousands of nurses to the US, and we've never actually seen a nurse case go to this deferred action before. So hopefully, it wouldn't happen to anybody who's watching. But in our experience, it's really more, it's the officer that you get when you come into the airport. Some people kind of go through in very quickly, a few minutes. And for some people, it depends on the officer, they might take longer. They are, again, just important to be prepared and to have that expectation. So thank you for sharing that, Carl. So the one thing that I wanted to just ask you about is the visa packet. Can you talk a little bit about the visa packet that the nurses will receive from the consulate?
Well, again, it's sort of like the medical exam. I mean, keep it sealed. They'll give you an envelope. And if you open the envelope, you're going to have big problems, getting your green card at the airport. They want it to be sealed. And then when you get off the plane and go through the line and get into secondary, they'll open the packet, and it's the whole package, right? So it's the I-140 that the hospital or the employer filed for you. It's the paperwork, the DS-260 form that you filed with the embassy, and all the, your birth certificate. If you're married, the marriage certificate, your kids' birth certificates, and so on. And, the answers are on the DS-260 of all these questions. Have you ever been arrested or convicted? No. Have you ever been a member of a terrorist organization? No. Blah, 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 all the questions. And they may ask you a few of those questions again. It just depends on the officer at the airport. But they're the ones who have to open it. They're the ones who have to stamp your passport. And once you get that passport stamp and go, woo, I made it through, and now I'm, driving on the freeway back to, with my relatives and going to start my job on Monday, you won't actually have the plastic green card. That'll come several weeks.
Yes, that's something that I'm pleased that you mentioned, because many people don't realize that they're not going to actually get the physical card right away.
Right. Yeah, they manufacture that, and I don't even know where it comes from, but the USCIS will send it to you in the mail, usually several weeks later. I think the cutoff date is like 45 days. So if you don't get it in 45 days, you can just write a little letter and say, hey, where's my green card, and so on. And then I should mention that not everybody understands it, but after you get a green card, you're entitled to sponsor some relatives for green cards. I mean, let's say you're not married, you're single, but a few weeks later, a few months later, you marry your boyfriend. Can you apply for a green card for him? Yes, you can. It's under the family 2A category. Or let's say you're older and you have kids over 21, so they couldn't come with you. Can you sponsor them for a green card? Yes, you can do that. And then after 5 years of having the green card, you can apply and become a U.S. citizen. And at that time, you can apply for your parents, you can apply for brothers and sisters, and there's a whole range of benefits that you get as a citizen that you don't have as a green card holder. And if I could just put in a small plug, so I do have a newsletter that I've been writing for over 25 years. And I always tell the nurses that it's worth the price. It's free. So, so if you go to schusterman.com, my webpage, and you scroll down and look at the right, if you put your name and your email address and click "I'm not a robot," you will get the newsletter. We don't solicit people, or it's just when some development comes out of the Immigration Service. So, I mean, right now, I'll probably come out with a newsletter in just a few days about what we were talking about, which is the requirements to have the COVID vaccine before you can have a green card. But there may be things have been really changing in the last few months more than usual. So there may be something else that comes out in a week or in a month and so on that we're not talking about today. So if you get the newsletter, at least you'll be informed, so you can go and fulfill that requirement and not have to worry about, oh my God, like Schusterman didn't say that on the video. Well, he didn't say it because it didn't come out until 8 weeks after the video.
Okay. Yeah. So subscribe to Carl's newsletter. I think it's a great resource. And as I said in the beginning, this is the reason why we do this show, Onward and Upward, is because it's really important to educate yourself about the process. It's not an easy process. It's complicated. It can be very stressful. It's very overwhelming, and people, can feel scared. But really, if you are educating yourself about the different stages, it can take a lot of that fear and stress out of it. And you know what questions to ask, you know how to prepare yourself, and it just makes a much more seamless transition. And I can tell you, as an immigrant myself, as I mentioned, I came here 21 years ago on the 4th of July. I always mention that because it was really my true independence, with Independence Day, America's Independence Day, and mine. But the day that you get that green card, oh my gosh, I can cry when I remember it. It's just the best feeling in the world because you've worked so hard. There's so much planning. There's so much time, energy, money that goes into it. And it's just the greatest feeling to get that green card. And then when you become a citizen, oh my gosh, even better. So that's what we want for all of you. Okay, Carl, so before we move on to the visa bulletin, because we've been talking and I can't believe we're already towards the end of the show, but I just want to put up a graphic of some insider tips, just to remind everybody some things that Carl has mentioned, and just some pointers and tips that we've learned over the years for people to be aware of. So the medical exam must be with an embassy-approved doctor. If the doctor gives you an envelope, do not open it. Arrive early for your interview and dress professionally. Practice answering the list of potential questions. Keep your answers brief, accurate, concise, and factual. Follow Carl's 3 rules. If you get an approval, do not open the visa packet. You need to enter the US within 6 months from the date of your approval. Don't resign from your job. This is important. Don't resign from your job or sell your house or belongings until you have an approval. Your immigrant visa will be placed in your passport. Review for errors. We've had sometimes the names are spelled incorrectly, things like that. You need to notify the consulate if you see any errors. And the last one, this is also important. Pay the USCIS immigrant fee online. You will not receive your green card until you've paid that fee. So just a few insider tips to help you be prepared, and hope that this will be a stressful and easy and happy experience. Okay, so in the last few minutes now, Carl, we just have around 5 to 10 minutes left. If you want to talk about the visa bulletin, we get a lot of questions. So I see Kiara's asking visa bulletin predictions for the following months, please. Lacing is asking, with the current backlog, will the employer file for an expedite? Oh, Lacing, this question, file for an expedite, we actually covered that yesterday in the show. So please go ahead and watch that, and you'll get that answer for your question. There's a lot of questions that I see in the chat. Aisha has a question. Aishiana I hope I've got that right, has a question about being born from India. We covered that question yesterday. So there's a lot of questions in the chat that have already been answered. So feel free to check that out. But Carl, let's talk about the visa bulletin. This is a topic that's very confusing to people. And in fact, yesterday, one of the lawyers, Chris Musello, said he sometimes finds it confusing. So take us through, first of all, what is the visa bulletin, number one? Number two, what are the predictions?
Okay. So the visa bulletin is something that's put out by the U.S. Department of State on a monthly basis because the number of people who can immigrate to the U.S. is numerically limited. 226,000 people can immigrate through the family preferences, and 140,000 people can immigrate through the employment preferences. Although I must say that if not all the family preference visas are given out, or not all the employment visas are given out, then the next year, the unused numbers are given to the other category. So in the last year, because the pandemic has been so severe, the embassies have been operating on very, very limited capacity. So over 150,000 of the 226,000 family numbers are not going to be given out by the end of September, which is the end of the government's fiscal year. It's not the calendar year. It's October 1st to September 30th each year. So those numbers will be transferred over to the employment numbers, which is fantastic news for the nurses because the predictions by Charlie Oppenheim from the State Department, which I put on my website, we have a visa bulletin prediction page. He is now doing a video once a month, and you can join it. You can ask questions. Used to be for 40 years, it was just us lawyers that, I would have dinner with Charlie and we'd talk about this. But, if you were a nurse in the Philippines, you wouldn't be able to have dinner with Charlie. Yeah. But now at least you can join him on these monthly videos, and you can ask questions about it. This year, Charlie has said that starting October 1st, there will be a minimum of 290,000 employment-based green cards.
Wow.
That's over double the normal number. That has never happened in my career. That will never happen again. So this is the perfect time if you're going to immigrate through a job.
290,000.
And he said minimum. It could be over 300,000. He doesn't know until after September 30th. But this is a fantastic opportunity. I know Tanya and I, we've talked about this before, but as recently as October 2015, so only 6 years ago, took 7 years for us to, under the visa bulletin, for a Filipino nurse to come to the U.S. Now it's current. So if it has a C on the visa bulletin, that means there's no waiting time. Now, of course, it takes time to process the I-140, to get your documents through the National Visa Center, to set up an appointment. So all of that could take a year or something, but at least you're not waiting in some 7-year-long wait. And that 7-year-long wait could come back in a couple of years. So if you want to come to the U.S., there's never been a more perfect time. Now, to go through the visa bulletin really quickly, I have it on my webpage, but I could put you all to sleep, doing this. So there's 5 different family let's forget about the family categories for a minute. There's 5 different employment categories, and we call them EB, employment-based. So employment, EB 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The 5th is for people with $1 million who are investing, and the first preference, EB1, is for people of extraordinary ability. Most nurses are in the EB3 category, which includes professionals, skilled workers, and unskilled workers. and it's current for the Philippines. The only countries that are backed up in EB3 are India and China, okay? And they have severe backlogs, especially India. So if you are going to immigrate as a nurse, you're going to be in the EB category. Your spouse and kids will also be in the EB category. There is a numerical limit per country. So no country can get over 7% of those 140 or 290,000 green cards. So, keep that in mind. When it starts backing up, we call that retrogression. And everybody's afraid of retrogression. I've had a dozen Filipino nurses write me in the last few weeks about retrogression. I don't expect, and Charlie, more important than what I expect, Charlie doesn't expect any retrogression, at least in the first few months of the coming year. So from October until next spring, the Philippines should be current. Usually if it is retrogression, it comes in the last 2 months of the year because they've given out so many green cards. So that would be August or September. And that might not happen. It just depends how open the embassies become, because right now a lot of nurses are having big problems trying to get interviews. The embassy is only partially open because of the pandemic and because of the last administration not being too friendly with immigration. They have not hired enough State Department employees to do all the required interviews. So they're in the process of doing that, but they have to undergo background checks. So it takes a few months for that to happen. A couple other things about the visa bulletin. I said, your spouse and your kids that are unmarried and under 21 can come. But there is something called the Child Status Protection Act, a law that Congress passed in 2002. So the amount of time that your I-140 was pending, from the date that it was submitted to the date it was approved, not the date you got your interview. So that might be a few months, but that can be subtracted from the child's age at the time your visa number becomes available. So what they have is they have something called the final action date chart. And on the final action date chart every month, it says, okay, here, right now it's current, but if there's a backlog, it might say June 1st, 2020, and only people who have priority dates, and the priority date is established by when that I-140 was filed for the nurse. So people before that date, if their I-140 was received by immigration, that's the priority date. So when that priority date comes up, if your child just turned 21, 3 weeks before that, but the petition was pending for 5 months, then that 5 months gets subtracted from the child's age. So the child is locked in at 20 years old. It's a complicated thing, and I have some videos on my site if you want to get into the Child Status Protection Act. And then
sorry to interrupt you, Carl, but we did actually cover that also yesterday, and I think I saw a question in the chat of somebody who had a question about that. I'm just looking as we're speaking, and we got 2 more minutes of the show. But that I think it's really on a case-by-case basis, right? You've got to evaluate the specific.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to mention one other thing, and I'll be quick, but cross-chargeability. So, if you're born in the Philippines, then you're going to be under the Philippine quota, and right now it's current, so you're in good shape. But if it starts backing up, and let's say your spouse was born in another country, you can use your spouse's country of birth if that makes your green card faster. So just something to keep in mind.
And that can also be very helpful for a lot of nurses that were born in India, if their spouse was born in a country that's current, correct?
That's exactly right. India is a big mess. I say, please have a boyfriend from Sri Lanka and get married. I just want to introduce Lusby Minda here. My wife, Sonia.
Hi, Sonia. Nice to see you.
Kumusta kayo dyan?
Great to see you, Sonia. As Carl said, Sonia's wife is originally from the Philippines, and we just love to see her on the show because, you know, it always brings such great fun. It's the tour of the little lovebirds.
Goodbye.
So everybody watching, we've come to, I cannot believe the hour has just flown by. We have so many questions in the chat. I know that so many of you are asking questions that I'm trying to get to as many as we can. Carl has been very kind and has offered to go through the chat afterwards and just comment on any specific immigration questions. I noticed yesterday and today we also have some licensing questions. So just for you to know, we will have more shows coming up on Onward and Upward, and we will be tackling some of the licensing questions that you have. And I also noticed we have a lot of questions on the adjustment of status process. So that is another show that Carl will be joining us on. We will be talking about the EB3 green card, but the different route that you might have if you are in the country and doing an adjustment of status process. Because right now we've been talking, as you know, about the EB3 consular process. Okay, well, we are at the hour. So I wanted to thank Carl so much. This was so informative, so helpful. And I know that there are nurses all over the world that are so grateful for your insights, your advice, your guidance. Very, very important information on the EB3 green card process. And for anybody who missed the 2 shows that we did, one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. Sorry, it's been a long week. On Thursday, please check that out on the Kinetics USA Facebook page. And there's a lot of information taking you through what is a green card, the 5 stages, lots of detail. So great information, and it's specifically designed for nurses. So this is really for global nurses all over the world. So share this, please, with your friends and colleagues. This is our way of paying it forward for you. We want to help and share information, and we would love it if you would share that, pay it forward for others, and share it with your other friends and relatives and colleagues who are also nurses. So to finish off, I wanted to also just share the winner of the raffle. So we had until 8:15 to download the booklet, and please go ahead and continue to download the booklet. And this is a booklet that is being designed specifically for nurses, talking about the EB3 green card process with lots of hot tips and insider information. And we want to congratulate Beverly Joy Candido, who is going to be the winner of the raffle. So congrats, Beverly. She downloaded the booklet before the 8:15 cutoff, and our team will be contacting you, Beverly. I know you give your email address, so look out for the email with the contact from Kinetics, and we will be liaising with you to share the prize with you. And the last thing I wanted to share is just a success path. This is going to be put on the Kinetics website, and it will also be shared into our chat. And you can see the steps that you need to go through in order to come and live and work in the US. So today we were looking at, or for the last 3 days, at the visa framework, so the green card, EB3 green card. But over the next coming weeks, we're going to be doing a lot of shows on all of these different stages. So we're going to be talking about the NCLEX. We're going to be talking about preparing for your interview with your employers, talking about the licensing, the credentialing, getting ready to come to the US, what to do when you arrive here, and then, you know, you're just going to enjoy and prosper. So that success path is available to you because many nurses never, don't know where to start. And it's great to have that roadmap. And the last thing I want to share with you is just some of the initiatives that we have at Kinetics, because I see that we have in the chat lots of questions about the IELTS. So we have for all Kinetics nurses a free IELTS review course. I see also in the chat, I think it was, oh gosh, there were so many nurses, and I'm just scrolling through to see who it was, but a lot of nurses have asked about if they haven't yet passed the NCLEX, how to go about that. So just for you to know, we have an NCLEX scholarship, which is where you can apply on the Kinetics USA website, and we can evaluate you for the NCLEX scholarship. We also have, very exciting, a $1,000 referral fee. If you know any nurses who have passed the NCLEX, the promotion ends on the 31st of October at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go to our website and you can get all of the info about the referral fee. We have a podcast where we're sharing stories about nurses who are already here. We also have a nurse aid program, and I saw we have a lot of questions in the chat from a lot of people. I think, gosh, there were too many to actually mention about the nurse aid, so more information about that. And obviously always join our Onwards and Upwards live show. And last but not least, we have had some people ask about allied needs, and yes, we do have a division in that area. So lots of information, more to come. Thank you, everybody who's watching. Thank you to Carl for your input today. And as we say, onwards and upwards.
Very good.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.